It's noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure there'll be lots more folks joining us. We're so happy that you've chosen to be with us today. My name is Nicole Netherton. I'm the Executive Director of Travis Audubon. Welcome to our summer lunchtime lecture series featuring Shelia Hargis, who will be sharing her knowledge about and love for purple martins today. You may have seen we'll be having another fun event on Facebook Live at the Roost up in Round Rock starting at 7:30 tonight. You can check out our website and join us then this evening to make today even more fun, more full of purple martin goodness. All of us at Travis Audubon are so grateful for your donations today. We are working really hard to provide programming and to continue to fulfill our mission during this crisis. We have been so thrilled by your response, especially to these Zoom lectures. We appreciate the ways that you are supporting Travis Audubon even when we can't be together, and we have a few more of these to go. We'll do these through August, so we hope you will join us for all of these. A few housekeeping items before your start. If you haven't already, if you could turn off your video and mute your microphone to minimize the distraction. Throughout the presentation, you are welcome to enter any comments or ask any questions in the chat box, and we should have some time at the end of the presentation to address them with Shelia. Now on with the show. I have heard our speaker talk about many bird-related topics, and I never tire of hearing her share her expertise with us. Many of you already know and love Shelia Hargis, who has been a member and volunteer with Travis Audubon for 22 years. Sheila's dedication as a crime intelligence analyst supervisor with the Austin Police Department is rivaled only by her passion for birds and birding. Shelia has served on the Travis Audubon Board of Directors for 12 years, including 2 as board president. During her tenure, she hired staff, led the fundraising for and subsequent acquisition of 10 acres for Baker Sanctuary, and oversaw the donation of Caturac Canyon to Travis Audubon. She also invented our famous purple martin parties, which is important for today. Her service really helped transform TAS from a local birding club into a proper conservation organization, and we're forever grateful to Shelia. Something very, very exciting that I hope you have heard about is that Shelia will be our 11th recipient of the Victor Emanuel Conservation Award this October. Normally, in normal days, we would have a luncheon in celebration, but we will be hosting a virtual party in her honor on October 2nd. I'd like you to please mark your calendars, know that more information is coming soon. Registration is free, and not only will you be entertained, but you will come away with an even greater appreciation for the work that Shelia has done for bird conservation. You can also attend in your pajamas, which is probably the highlight. We'll put the link for the event in the chat box so that you can see where you can learn more about what we're going to do. And please watch our website for registration to open next month. So we are so thrilled to have you join us to honor Shelia. So now it's time for Purple Martins. Without further ado, I give you Shelia Hargis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole, for those kind words. I personally am looking forward to attending the Victor Emanuel Conservation Luncheon in my PJs. So that's totally cool. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, and then we will get started. All right, Nicole, are you seeing my PowerPoint at this point?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. For those of you who know me, I love talking about birds. And to be honest, I tried to get Kaylee to let me talk for like 3 hours today, but she said, no, just an hour. So I'm gonna try to stick to that limit and but still share some amazing information about purple martins with you. I'm gonna start off with talking a little bit about identification. Now, y'all are Travis Audubon folks. I'm confident how to identify purple martins down to the species, but I'm going to push you a little bit further and, share with you, well, okay, is it an adult male, adult female? Is it a full adult bird, or is it a second-year bird? So we're going to push that a little bit further, maybe, than what you have done so far. And then we're going to get into some of the some aspects of this bird's life. Not all of them. This is, you know, I find this to be a very interesting species, and there's so much information to share, but I'm going to focus on some of those aspects that maybe you're not as familiar with. And then I'll wrap that up with the conservation concerns. You know, how do we think about conservation for this species? And then leave you with some resources, because I hope at that point you're wanting to learn more. So we'll jump right into the identification. Purple martins are North America's largest swallow, and the body of this bird is about 8 inches long. The wingspan is 15 inches long. And like most swallows, they have, as you can see in this picture, you can see on the bottom right, the wings are, you know, kind of swept back and pointed. So these are very, these birds are very good in the air. Now this is an adult male, and this bird is at least 2 years old, because it takes him that long to get to this plumage. And what you see, depending on the lighting, you'll either see a bird that looks all black, or you may see some sheen or some kind of looks like iridescence on the bird. And that iridescence could take the, you know, color of it. May look blue to you, or it may look purple to you. But the lighting is really critical to what color this bird appears to you. And if you notice on this perched bird, you'll see that the tail has a little notch in it. Now, some of our other swallows have deeper notches, but there is some notch there. So look at this, you know, overall dark bird with this notch in the tail and those swept back wings. And one of the things that we see in a lot of what are called aerial insectivores, these birds that catch their food, their insect food in the air, is that they have a really wide gape. So they can open their mouth really wide, thereby making it a little bit easier while they're flying to catch a flying insect. And you can really see it well on this picture of this purple martin. You can see that kind of like the jaw, the hinge of the jaw goes back all the way to under the eye. So this bird can open its mouth really wide. Now, as is the case with most species, if you learn to identify their sound, that's going to help you a lot, because even if you don't catch the movement of a bird, you can potentially hear them if they're around. So I just want to refresh your memory on what purple martins sound like, and just note that you should hear the sound, but just be ready to increase the volume or decrease the volume on your computer. Oops, sorry. So I know there's many times when I'm sitting out on my back porch or, out birding somewhere, where I will hear the purple martins overhead, and I'll look up and I just cannot see them. They're so high in the sky that, I cannot see them. So it's really good to clue into their vocalizations, because that's going to help you. Now, moving on to the adult female. This is a female that's at least 2 years old. And this is where it starts to get a little more challenging with the identification, because the younger birds, those who are less than 2 years old, are going to look very similar to this adult female. But there's some things to look for to tell them apart. Now, in general, you see that the female has that dark back and wings like the male. She has that dark crown like him, but she has the nape, or the back of her neck, is kind of a mottled gray color, and she kind of looks like a little necklace, around her neck. And then underneath, she's very different from him. She has this, again, this mottled gray off-white color. And what you want to look for to identify her to being a full adult, at least 2 years old, is the area underneath her tail. So I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but on the right-hand bird, you can see underneath the tail, and this is called the chrysalm area, and you see these little dark areas. So if you see a bird like this, then you know it's an adult female. Now, the second year birds, these are called these are called second year birds. They're actually birds that are roughly about to turn 1 year old. They were born last year. And so those are called second year birds because it's their second spring, so to speak. And on the left-hand side, what you'll see is a second year male. So you can see he's already started under his throat and chin area and a few spots on his breast. He started to get those dark feathers that you expect of the full adult male. So the second year males are pretty easy. But when you get to the second year females, they get a little more challenging. You may look at this bird on the right and go, oh man, that looks just like the adult female. But look at that area under the tail, that chrism area. The young bird doesn't have those dark spots. So that's going to help you tell them apart, if you want to take your identification to this level. Totally up to you. Now, I just want to clue you in. I'm not going to talk about the breeding of purple martins, but I want you to kind of fix this map into your mind because it's going to play a part later. And what this map is showing you is that the orange areas are the breeding range of the purple martin. And what you see is that, wow, there's something happening in the Rocky Mountains that causes a break in the distribution. So the eastern birds, pretty much all the area east of the Rocky Mountains, if you're in the right habitat, you have a possibility, it's a good chance you're going to see or hear purple martins. West, it's much more spotty, so you really have to be in a certain area to find those birds west. And these are different subspecies. I think with time and that separation, they'll potentially be split, but that's probably a good ways down the road at this point. So the eastern population, or you can see the yellow in this map, that's the migration areas outside of the breeding areas. So just kind of keep that in mind as we continue through our conversation today. So once the young birds are on their own, then it's time for all of them, and especially the adults, like more quickly than the young birds, are going to start thinking about migrating southward. And we know that they migrate to South America. So it's a matter of, well, how does a bird up in, basically North America get to South America? We know that these are called, these are diurnal migrants. That means they migrate during the day. And so at night, this is where it really gets exciting, in my opinion. They come together in these communal roosts. And that's what we're going to spend some time talking about now. The roost sites they're basically, as I'm going to show you here, they're basically, they cover all of that area east of the Rockies where you would expect, birds to be traveling through and need a place to spend the night. This is a map that is one of the citizen science projects of Purple Martin Conservation Association. The way this works is that someone who is at a roost can gather the location information and some details about the roost, and then go into the database that PMCA has and enter that information. And as they enter that data, then a point shows up on this map. And then, there's more information available if you dig deeper. So what you're seeing on this map is a lot of purple dots. Those are roosts in which someone, a birder, or somebody knowledgeable went out and says, yes, those are purple martins that are roosting here. Now, there's a lot of yellow dots on this map, and those are unconfirmed roosts. But this is an instance of researchers looking at weather radar and seeing a certain signature that causes them to think, oh, that looks like a purple martin roost. So what does that look like on radar? This is a sequence of screenshots of radar over time. And so this is the method that you would look at it. So what you see is, a number one screenshot. This is early in the morning, like pre-dawn. And you may notice, if you're watching radar, you may notice this little red, very small red area. And you can kind of see it in the center of that screenshot. And then you keep watching, and that red area continues to get bigger and expand. And, you know, as the morning progresses, you get more and more bigger, you know, circles, and then to the point to where you're starting to kind of get a donut effect of these birds have gotten up in the air around the roost, and they're starting to fly around and disperse. And so by the time, you know, we're down to the number 8, the birds have basically left the roost and they're starting to disperse into the surrounding areas to feed or to continue south. So that's what the researchers were looking for to populate that map. And what they hope people will do is that they'll go and check out this map and find one of those yellow circles, and then actually go there and see if it's purple martins or if it's some other type of bird that's you know, coming off of a roost. Now, typically the roost sites are, at least in southern United States, are June to late August. They are typically in trees or under bridges. But what the birds are looking for is this wide open space that has enough trees or enough bridge for a bunch of birds to spend the night together. So here's some examples of some roost sites. This is off the coast of the Carolinas, and the birds were roosting under this bridge. And those little, you know, fuzzy things in the air are birds coming off or going into the roost. Here's one from Stratford, Texas, and what you see here is a shopping center situation where you have buildings, but you have this big open space for parking lots with clumps of usually live oak trees, and that's where the birds will, you know, they'll take advantage of those live oak trees and roost there. Here's the same situation in Houston, where you have a mall and with not quite as much parking space, but still plenty with those trees kind of grouped together for the birds. Now, I have now taken that map and zoomed in to look at Texas. And what we see from that is that there's, you know, 15 to 25 roosts in Texas. And you can see they're in, you know, the metroplexes, so to speak, as well as Beaumont and Corpus Christi and Brownsville and some others. Then I can zoom in even further if I want to, you know, dig down and better understand what's happening in an area. I can dig down and then actually click on one of those circles, and it will pop up something like this. So it'll give you the latitude and longitude, so you could go to that location and check it out. And then you can even click further on this view reports option, and that will take you to the details about that roost. So there is historical information in this map. So don't think that all of these are active this year. You really need to go and dig down a little bit deeper to see, you know, when it was last known to be an active roost. Now, I will just tell you, this is totally unbiased on my part, but Austin's roost is the best in Texas. Well, you know, I'm pretty sure it's the best in the nation, but I'm confident it is the best one in Texas. So, you know, unbiased all the way. Our roost starts in June. Now, we, us roost hunters, normally go out about mid-June or a little bit later to look for the birds and to see where the roost is. And, you know, we've kind of been doing that about that time because we thought, well, before that, there's going to be too few birds for us to find them. So we're not sure exactly when the roost starts forming, but by mid-June, you know, there is a roost. And, you know, the numbers early in the roost season are small, but they continue to build over time. And by late July, we think that's about the peak time when we had the most birds at the roost, and then the numbers start to fall off after that. And typically the roost is pretty much gone by late August. If you've been in Austin for a while, you probably remember the Highland Mall. This was a mall that I guess was built in the early 80s. And it was, you know, your typical mall situation. Again, this big, huge building with a lot of concrete around it and these groups of trees. And so from at least the mid-1980s through 2014, the purple martins roosted somewhere in this area. They weren't always in the same group of trees, but they were somewhere in this area. And that, so for, 30 something years, they were in this area. And then in 2015, we went out to the Highland Mall area to, find where the roost is going to be that year, and we couldn't find the birds. So we were able to follow them. It wasn't too hard to figure out where they had moved to, but they had moved about a mile away to Capitol Plaza. And if you're familiar with that, it's that same situation of a shopping center with a bunch of open parking areas and then groups of trees. And the birds originally started out roosting in these trees, but as the season progressed, they moved to these set of trees. Then in 2016, they just did a quick little hop north and ended up at Embassy Suites. So that's like a third of a mile, not too far at all. So it didn't take us long to figure out where they were there. Not quite as much open parking space area, but still the birds were happy with this. And they were in these trees here with the overflow kind of going to those trees around the perimeter. And I have to say that Embassy Suites was like the best host ever for the purple martin. So we were all very appreciative of them, taking care of our birds, treating our birds well. Then the next year, it was just like right across the street in Texas Land and Cattle. And this was a little bit crazy because there wasn't that many trees in this area, but the birds somehow made do with the trees here and then one up a little bit further north. Then in 2018, we went to Embassy Suites thinking, okay, where are the birds? They're going to go back to Capitol Plaza. Where are they going to be? Well, we looked and we drove around. We went over to Highland Mall thinking, oh my God, they've returned to Highland Mall, but they weren't at Highland Mall. And so we drove around and we couldn't find our birds. And we couldn't find the roost site. And so I think we went out another time and drove around some more and we couldn't find the birds. So we were starting to get, kind of a little concerned. And we put out the word to, hey, does anybody know where the roost is? And luckily, I think the story is that a landlord, a purple martin landlord from Georgetown, was actually looking at radar and he saw what looked like a roost signature, and come to find out that was the roost, and they had moved all the way to Round Rock. So that is about 13 miles. And, you may think, oh my God, what the heck happened? But, if you really think about it logically, the cost of living in Austin is so freaking high now that everybody's moving to the suburbs, right? So, it makes total sense to me. All right, so the birds are still using the Round Rock location for their roost. And this is the general area. So it's La Frontera shopping center area. And you've got I-35 on the east side of it and 45 on the south side of it. So as we zoom in, this is the basic area where the purple martins have been. And so for 2019, roughly in this area here, they originally started in these trees over here by Applebee's, but they spent most of the season using the trees in this area here. And as the numbers built, they would expand to more and more trees throughout the season. Now this year, as of the 11th, July the 11th was the last time I was up there. Here are the trees that they were using last year, and here are the trees that the majority of the birds are roosting in now. So this is Hobby Lobby is here and Maggie Moo's is here. So, the trees in between those two buildings is the main roost. But I also drove around after, it got dark, and there were some birds in these trees at Applebee's. There were some birds in the Slotsky's trees. There were some birds in the Pier 1 import parking lot. So we'll see, it won't be that unusual for them to move as the season progresses, but I'm confident that they'll stay, famous last words, I'm confident that they'll stay in this general area. So yeah, I am really confident of that. So I'm guessing everyone has been out to the roost, but just in case you haven't, I'll walk you through what to expect. So one thing that we know is happening is that it's common for smaller groups of birds to congregate at other locations, usually with water nearby, before they come to the roost. So you may have a small gathering of birds down on Ladybird Lake or at Mueller Ponds or at Old Settlers Park, congregating to either bathe or drink or both. And then at some point they will move up to the roost to spend the night. So this is my friend Jim Giacomo's photograph from Old Settlers Park. And he has regularly seen the birds kind of gathering there before they move to the roost. Then once at the roost, what the experience is going to be that if you show up there maybe, you know, an hour or 45 minutes before sundown, then you'll probably see some birds flying around. There won't be many, and they'll probably be very high in the sky. But as the night progresses, as we get closer and closer to dark, then more and more birds are coming in, and they're flying lower. And the cool thing about this is that they don't just come in and perch in the tree and hang out in the tree. They swirl around and put on these amazing shows above, you know, our heads. And that's where it's very exciting, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to show you a video, but videos do not come anywhere close to portraying the true experience. If you have not seen this in person, you have to go see it in person. It has to be on your bucket list, okay? So anyway, here's a short video, and I want all of you to count the number of birds in this video, because that's going to be your test question. All right, let's go. So yeah, write down your number so that you know, Nicole can test you on that you know, later. So that was early in the season. That was this season, early in the season. So if you go out there now, you're going to see a lot more birds than what was in that video. But that's a good start for you, you know, in your counting abilities. Now you might think that there's so many trees up there that the birds could really spread out and, you know, kind of have some elbow room, so to speak. Well, they don't tend to do that. They tend to be, want to be close to each other. So this is a picture of them at the Embassy Roost, the Embassy Suites roost, with them just packed in there together. And, you know, if you go up to the roost, and don't just leave when the aerial show is over, you know, take a little time and walk up to see the birds packed in, because that's pretty cool too. Don't get too close, but just get close enough to get a sense of what's going on in the tree itself. Now, the number of birds at the roost at any given time, that is, you know, we kind of try to get a sense of the numbers early in the season when it seems to be manageable to count. Like, you know, counting 1,000 birds seems to be manageable if you do it by, you know, blocks of 50, say, or 100. And then we look at how many birds are in the trees given whatever that number is. And then as the season progresses, we try to extrapolate to come up with some number. But, you know, who knows really how many there are. But we think it's believable that in early July, there may be 10,000 birds at the roost. And then when the numbers have peaked in you know, roughly late July, we believe there could be 400,000 or more birds there. Now, we can say those numbers because who in the heck can prove us wrong? There's no method for accurately counting birds. And I keep hoping that somebody will come up with this method, because it truly would be really cool to know how many birds are at our roost. But for right now, you'll just have to take my word for it, or go up there and count them yourself and then report your numbers to me. All right, so I think it was well, I don't know, sometime before 2012, Andy and Julia Belinsky had been inviting me for several years to come up to the Purple Martin parties. Oh, you got to come see, I mean, up to the Purple Martin roost. You got to come see this. This is amazing. And I said, yeah, I'm sure it's amazing, but you know, it's past my bedtime and I live way down south, so I can't come. And so I finally went up there and I was blown away. And then, and then of course I had to go many times. And at some point, me and all of my big ideas, I thought, oh, seriously, this is a spectacular event. This is a spectacle of nature that everyone should know about. The birders knew about it and they were coming up there to see it, but it's like, oh my God, we have to get the word out. We have to have a Purple Martin party. So we started the Purple Martin parties. It's kind of like a tailgate party for birders and non-birders. And what people were telling us regularly was, oh my gosh, this is better than the bats. And I personally think the bats are super cool. So to have people say this is even better than the bats, I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. And so our Purple Martin parties have been, since I think 2012 to, 2019 so far. And they were on Friday and Saturday nights, usually in July, and then maybe we might go into August depending on how things fell in the calendar. We would tell people to bring their lawn chair and definitely recommend that they bring a hat and or an umbrella because, when you have 100,000 birds swirling overhead, well, things happen. So you want to be prepared. And this is a picture of our party at Embassy Suites one night. And, we definitely have birders in the audience, but we have so many people that have no clue about birds. And the fun part about it is we're working the crowd, we're answering questions, from very basic questions to more detailed questions. And my experience has been these people are hungry for this information. So it's such a rewarding experience to be a part, to be a volunteer at the Purple Martin parties and be able to share this, more information about this amazing event with them. This is Julia Belinsky on the left, Andy Belinsky on the right, and then Denise Daly are three of our amazing volunteers. Denise loves to work the display, and so people will come up there and look at the display, and Denise will answer all their questions. And then we've gone throughout the years, we've gotten better and better about, our Travis Audubon presence there and making sure that people know it's Travis Audubon that's bringing this to them, So we're hoping to, to just turn people on to birds. This is Denise up in 2018. She, and these people potentially don't have a clue what Purple Martins are, but they've heard about this event, they're coming. And so this is Denise, pointing out a Purple Martin and talking about those field marks for how do you tell a Purple Martin from a great-tailed grackle or whatever, So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to bring people in who might not come to us on their own for a walk or whatever, but what we're hoping is that after this event, they're more interested in birds and they're more interested in Travis Audubon, and hopefully we have some of them hooked. And this is, in 2019, we got this amazing upgrade to our displays, and here is our amazing staff, Travis Audubon staff, with the displays in 2019. So those are safely put away this year, but we'll be ready for next year, I hope. And so obviously, given the the pandemic that we're in, we're not having Purple Martin parties this year, but we're still providing the information for people to go up and see this spectacle on their own. And there's a lot of room up there, so I really truly believe that you can do it safely if you wear your mask and you maintain your distance from other people. There's lots of open sky, and you can sit in many different locations and observe this and enjoy it. So I encourage you to do that, and just be safe about it. Okay, so now the birds they're in Austin. Well, okay, they're in Round Rock now, but what's happening for the rest of the journey, right? So they still have to get from Round Rock to South America. This part of their journey, we thought we knew some things. I mean, we definitely knew they were going to South America, but we really didn't know too much about how that really worked. But thankfully, advances in technology is helping us understand things. So bear with me here. I'm going to geek out on the technology for just a few moments, and hopefully you'll find it interesting too. So the first devices that that got small enough and light enough to actually put on a bird, a purple martin, were called geolocators. And the technology was that it would record the sunlight intensity throughout the time that the bird was wearing this device. And through some algorithm, some type of math, they could determine the approximate location of where the bird was. The accuracy wasn't all that great, but if you knew nothing, this was a huge improvement. And so the PMCA, Purple Martin Conservation Association, has been deploying these devices on purple martin since 2007. And this is the device itself. And this is how it looks on the back of a bird. So the way this works is they capture a bird on its nest colony, and then they attach this device, they let the bird go, and then the bird migrates south, hopefully survives that migration, hangs out in South America doing whatever during that time, then hopefully survives the northbound migration and makes it back to its colony where it's recaptured again. That device is removed and the data is dumped. And then the biologists, the scientists can analyze that data and come up with, you know, the route and the timing of this bird's travels. The next advance happened later in that GPS devices got small enough, again, to be light enough and small enough to be carried by a purple martin. And this was a different method. This was actually gathering GPS data, but because the battery had to be so small, you know, to make it lightweight, it could not capture GPS like our phones do now, right? It had to be smaller, and so they would only be periodic collection of latitude and longitude. But still, this was a huge advance because the accuracy was much better. And so that allowed us to see things that we hadn't been able to really determine what was happening with geolocators. These were first deployed on purple martins in 2014. Again, here's the device. You can see how small it is as compared to that nickel. And then here is the device. On the left-hand side is a geolocator, and on the right-hand side is a GPS data logger. So they roughly look the same on the birds. Again, this is a situation where, you know, you put it on the bird and they migrate, they come back, and then you retrieve it. So the same thing as the geolocator. Now we have these devices called nano tags, and I think they come in different sizes, but they can be so small that supposedly you can put them on dragonflies to watch their migration. It's just mind-boggling to me. But anyway, this is a different technology. This is a VHF radio transmitter. So you need a receiver to pick up this signal. So if you have a receiver covering a certain area and you've got a bird that flies into that area, then it records the time, the strength, and the direction of the signal, and a unique ID pulse. And so that allows you to know which bird is actually flying through this area or in the area. This is very accurate. And I think there's a couple of ways of deploying them. Sometimes it's gluing them to feathers, sometimes it's attaching them to the bird, but if they're glued to the feathers, then once the birds have molted their feathers, then the units just fall off, and you know, they're much less expensive than the other technology. So anyway, that's a new technology, a relatively new technology. And this is a map showing it's called the MOTIS network. And this is where those receivers are currently. And as you can see, there's a lot up in the Northeast, and there's a good number around the Gulf of Mexico, which of course makes total sense, right? Because that's, you know, all of these devices can be put on other species, not just purple martin. So of course, you know, understanding better what's happening with our migrants is of importance. And then I could just keep going in my geekiness here and talk about feather analysis and DNA and isotopes, but I'm going to leave that for another presentation. Okay, this is what a map looks like for a bird who's wearing one of these geolocators. So this was a specific bird that started off up, you know, in the northern United States, migrated via this route. The southbound migration is the red line, and then the northbound migration is the black line. So just to give you some sense of what's happening is this point here is roughly, you know, it's in Minnesota somewhere. But again, remember, it could be off for, you know, maybe 100 miles off, but still, you know, in that general area on August the 25th. On August the 26th, the bird is in Missouri. And that's between those 2 points is 500 miles. So again, if you take out, you know, the inaccuracy of this, maybe that's only 300 miles that bird flew that day. The next day, the bird is nearly on the Gulf Coast. It's in Louisiana near Lake Charles, and that is roughly 500 miles. So again, you know, you subtract, say, 100 miles for each of those points, you end up with only 500 miles that bird flew that day. So pretty cool, pretty impressive in my opinion, you know, those numbers. And so they, the researchers have looked at multiple maps like this and kind of, you know, come up with a calculation that it's totally common for birds, once they've started migrating, to fly anywhere from 180 to 250 miles a day, with some going over 300 miles a day. And this includes some time for stopovers, to a little bit of rest or whatever. So pretty impressive, you know, track that these birds are flying. Here's a couple more maps, and you can see these are different birds coming from different locations. And you can see that there's no one route. They take different routes to depending on where they're coming from and where they're going. So there's not a ton. I mean, the data set for these tracks is not huge yet, but it's getting bigger each year. And so we're starting to see some things that we didn't know before. One of the things that the researchers are seeing is that individual birds are flying and migrating and roosting independently. So it's not like all the birds at Hornsby Bend Colony decide, oh, hey, tomorrow pack your bags, we're headed to South America. It's like, nope, one bird gets up and decides, okay, I'm going, and they go. And then, you know, the others come whenever they're ready. Typically, the adults migrate before the young birds, but in general, they're all flying independently of each other. What we've seen is that, and actually this is a correction to what I talked to a PMCA staff member recently to clarify some of this information. And one thing that I've learned that I did not understand before is that potentially we have local birds that are coming to our roost. What they're seeing up in Pennsylvania, where PMCA is headquartered, is that they have these tracking devices on some of their birds. And what they see is that those birds, that once the young have fledged and are on their own, then the birds go to the roost and hang out at the local roost for a while. And that may be a week or two, and then they start heading south. So a roost in any given location is potentially going to have local birds as well as migrating birds. Now, we don't know that. We don't know for sure if that's what's happening at ours, but it makes sense because of basically the numbers that we have at our roost. So, but once a bird starts migrating, gets serious, you know, in heading south, they are spending maybe a day or two at any roost site. And then no matter where the bird is, whether they're up in, you know, Canada or on the Gulf Coast, all of them are usually in the tropics in less than a week. A lot of the birds that stop in the Yucatan Peninsula area, they tend to hang out there for a while. And the belief is that they're probably molting at that point. And so because molting is very energy intensive, the birds will hang out there and kind of rest and get that process completed, and then they'll continue on to South America. But even given that, all the birds are usually in South America within 6 weeks. So no slackers here. Now this is Sheila's research wish list. And that is, you know, I want to know what's happening with our birds. I so wish we had a bander who is available to help us deploy these geolocators, you know, these tracking devices. I mean, I can't, as just a, you know, an amateur birder, go off and grab some birds and put some devices on them. I have to, you know, you have to have a permit to do this. So I wish we had a permitter, you know, a permitted bander who would help us do this. And then we could study our birds and see where our birds were going. I think that would be fascinating. And I could totally see us having some Modus receivers around Austin. I would, of course, want one up at the Roost, you know, but I would also want one at Hornsby and at Commons Ford, because other birds are wearing those nano tags. And so it's like we could see all of the birds that are migrating through these locations. So I just think that would be super cool. And then again, like I said before, I would love to have someone who comes up with an accurate way of determining the numbers at the roost. And then, you know, one of the potential volunteer opportunities that I'm thinking about and talking with Jim Giacomo about is having, let's start gathering more information, more details about these pre-roost gathering locations. So, you know, if you're potentially interested in doing a little citizen science, look for that potential opportunity coming out soon. Okay, so we have, the birds are now, you know, moving towards South America, and they're going to spend what's winter for us. They're going to spend that time down in South America. And we still have so much to learn about what's happening with the birds down there. But thanks to these tracking devices, we're starting to fill in that picture. What we saw from the early days of the geolocators is that the majority of the birds are mainly in the Amazon River basin in Brazil. And the main habitat that they're in is forest. So like 91% of the roost are in forest. They do spend this time in roost. So 91% are in forest, with about 4% in agricultural land, and then a few in, you know, urban or man-made environments. The GPS data loggers being more accurate, they helped us see a little bit more clarity on this information, you know, this data. And what it showed was that roosts were comprised of individuals from different colonies, and that the birds moved about. They didn't just hang out in one location at one roost site this whole time. They moved about. So this is a map that was in the Purple Martin Update, which is the quarterly magazine of the PMCA. And what it shows is that the different colors are birds from different states. So blue is Florida, purple is Texas. So if you want to just focus on those, what you see is that there's different shapes for the purple lines on here. And so those are different individuals. So for purple, we have one individual that's shown as a circle, one that's a rectangle, and one that's a triangle. So you can see how, you know, there's just a big mixing, and over time how these birds have moved around over that season. So that's pretty cool, interesting information that we didn't necessarily know before. Now with the GPS data loggers, this was really much more accurate, the locations information. And so we were able to, well, they were able to determine that these birds that were quote unquote in the forest, a lot of them were on islands, and it may be truly an island in the Amazon River or its tributaries, or it was an island, a habitat island, in which you had one kind of habitat that was the roost, and then a different habitat around that roost. So here's a map that shows some birds on an island in the middle of a river. So that was really good information to have. Now, the Purple Martin Conservation Association has known that, oh my God, there's a huge gap in our understanding of what's happening with these birds when they're, you know, not in North America, not with us in North America. And of course, to truly be able to conserve a species, you have to understand and address their whole lifespan, right? You can't just focus on North America and totally ignore what's happening with them when they're in, you know, South America. So they've been making trips to South America. In November 2016, they went down there. Their main purpose was to find a roost. Well, they didn't find a roost, but they started building relationships with Brazilian researchers, and they started engaging Brazilians in reporting their roost locations. So just like that map I showed you, now they can start inputting data there and help, the researchers understand where these roost locations might be. Then they went back in 2018, November of 2018. Again, no roost was found, but already the Brazilian researchers had engaged their grad students and were working on projects around purple martins. And they installed the first MODIS, VHF receiver tracking station that had been ever installed in the Amazon. So they were kind of ready, for whenever they could find the birds. And then in March of 2019, I think it was a graduate student out on the river studying dolphins who saw what she thought was purple martins and reported that to someone involved in this research. And they went out, and sure enough, they had finally found a roost of purple martins in South America. So they were able to go out there and capture some of the birds, attach some nano tags to them so they could see how they're moving around throughout the rest of their time down there. And then what's really exciting is out of all of this collaboration, they have now created this International Purple Martin Working Group, and that's Canadian, US, and Brazilian researchers. And they're looking at all the different ways of studying different aspects about this bird. So this is all very exciting in my opinion. Okay, so as far as conservation goes for this bird, they are considered fairly common. The Partners in Flight estimates that there's a global breeding population of 7 million, with most of that breeding happening in the US. That makes sense given that map that we looked at of their breeding range. But a closer or a look at breeding bird survey data showed that from the years 1966 to 2015, each year there was a 1% decline in the population of this species. So over those 37 years, that's 37% decline. So that, I don't know about you, but that is cause for alarm right now. Yes, we still have a bunch of these birds, but we got to do something now to turn this trend around. This is the map showing that information. And what you're seeing here is the dark red areas are areas in which the population decreased, and the dark blue areas are areas in which the population increased. And I don't know about you, but I can't come up with I can't see a pattern here. I can't understand what is happening with this at this point, but I'm confident other people are looking at it and, drilling down to try to get a sense of, okay, what is really going on here? Now, again, as we think about conservation for any species, you have to think about their life and what they're doing, where they're doing it, and just look at all the ways that things can negatively impact their ability to survive. So with this bird, breeding is one of those areas, and that the eastern population is nearly 100% dependent on human-made housing. So that means that someone has to be engaged enough, be willing to be a purple martin landlord and put up a nest colony and manage that nest colony on their land or in their park. And it takes management. You can't just put it up and everything's good. You don't have to pay any attention to it before you really have to manage it. And that means keeping European starlings and house sparrows out of the nest because they will definitely outcompete the purple martins. Migration is a perilous undertaking for all species. So we're thinking specifically about martins, collisions with all the structures that we put up is a big one for all birds. But thinking about the roost, we in Austin area love our roost. I think it's probably pretty safe. But there are places where they don't like the mess and they don't like the trouble that, that the quote unquote trouble that these birds might cause. And so they could decide to, we're going to force the birds to move on, to go somewhere else to roost. So that's one of the things that, is a potential threat to them. And then, as I'm confident all of you know, free roaming cats are you know, they're not bad, but they take a huge toll on all wildlife. So they will also find roost and take advantage of that situation. So that's another concern for, you know, migration. And the time, you know, when the birds are off in South America, we don't even really know what all the threats are down there. But, you know, this new information that we're gathering, all the research that's underway is going to help us better understand that aspect and what the conservation concerns are during that time frame. And then this is a bird that is, you know, totally dependent on insects for its food source. And so as our insect populations are crashing, this is a huge concern for all birds who depend on insects, which is pretty much all birds to some degree. So that's another thing to address. So it's, you know, conservation is a huge issue. It's kind of, you know, it kind of is challenging to care at times, but it's worth caring about birds, and I am optimistic with this species, with all the new research, all the new capabilities, you know, technology for helping us understand this bird, that we can turn this around. We can turn that, you know, that decrease a population, we can reverse that trend. So there we have it. Okay, so I'm hoping by this point in time, you know, I ran through a lot of information very quickly. I'm hoping that you're engaged and interested to learn more. If so, I highly recommend that you go and check out Purple Martin Conservation Association's website. They have an amazing website with lots of information. They have, if you join as a member, you'll get a quarterly magazine that's very well done. They have a YouTube channel, and currently you should probably go check that out as soon as you get off of this, because they have a nest cam, and I think the babies are about to fledge. So, you know, go spend the rest of your afternoon watching that. And then they have a Facebook page, so go check that out also. Here's a book on Purple Martins. This is written by Robin Dowdy and Rob Fergus, which some of you may recognize those guys. And this is the second edition of that book that's been updated. And then here are some other resources for learning more about Purple Martins. And then lastly, there's some cool videos out there. This is one that I recently found after talking with the PMCA staff person, Dance of the Migrating Martins. And this tracks 28 Purple Martins that had those geolocators or GPS tags on. And you know, it follows, it's very basic, but it follows those birds to South America and sees them move around down there, and then follows them back up to Pennsylvania. So very simple, but pretty cool video. Then this is a recent one, 300,000 Purple Martins in the Amazon. This was a video of them going out to this roost in South America that they just found, and, you know, seeing the birds flying around, and then, you know, seeing them go in and capture some of the birds and attach tracking devices on them, take measurements, and all the stuff that they do when they capture a bird. And then this is Managing the Martins. This is an older video. This was done by Texas Parks and Wildlife a few years ago. They went out and interviewed Andy and Julie Belinsky out at Hornsby Bend about the nesting, you know, the breeding cycle of the birds. And then they came to the roost and talked with some of us out there. So it's very well done. And then another recent one is American Birding Association's podcast called Martin Migration with Dr. Kevin Frazier. So that's another one for you to check out when you have time. So with that, one other thing, if you are interested in being a landlord, again, we need more people to step up to be landlords. And the Purple Martin Conservation Association's website has detailed information on what it takes to be a landlord, what your habitat has to be like, you know, what do you need to do to, you know, maintain your colony and have it produce a lot of martins for you. So check that out. We typically have, Travis Audubon typically has a Purple Martin workshop. I think it's in February. So, you know, we'll kind of see how things are going in February and if we can make that happen next year. But that's also a good resource for you. All right. With that, on behalf of my Purple Martin friends, my Purple Martin Conservation Association family and my Travis Audubon family, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this, this amazing bird, and I will take some questions.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It's fascinating. Folks are asking if we can give a list of resources, which, if that's okay with you, we can compile that.
Absolutely.
Some of the questions that we have gotten are some good why questions. So other than the rising cost of living in Austin, do we know why the birds decide to change their location of the roost? Do we have any clues about what their decision-making process is?
No, I so wish we could interview some purple martins, but they have refused to be interviewed so far. You know, one of the theories about the Highland Mall area was that it had been purchased by Austin Community College and they were revamping that building. But the construction that was happening there during the day when the birds would be out in the field or have already left, you know. So I don't know why they left that area. And then really why, of all the shopping centers in the Austin area and Round Rock, why they would have decided to go 13 miles north up to Round Rock. I don't know. That's another thing I should add to my research wish list is like, how would we even determine how and where roost formed, you know? So yeah, I don't know on that one.
Well, and speaking of something that you just spoke of, do we know why they like urban areas, or is it a trick of the data that urban areas are where people notice them as opposed to that they have some preference for urban areas?
Well, good question. So if we go back to that map that shows the roost locations, you know, I would totally expect that the known ones, the ones that have been identified, are in those urban areas because that's where the birders mainly are. But because we're looking at the radar signature, those should be picking up roost locations outside of urban areas if they exist. Now, I think probably one of the things to consider with that is that I'm assuming it has to be a certain size roost before it will be picked up on radar. So there's actually, PMCA is actually doing a training I think next Monday night on how to read radar to determine, you know, to look for roost and such. So go check that out on their Facebook page if you're interested, because I think potentially there's smaller roost sites that we might actually be missing because they're just not big enough to show up, you know, when you're looking at basically the eastern United States for these signatures.
Similarly, do we know why they like parking lots?
Well, they like open areas, and I think probably the openness allows them to see predators. You know, again, why they also, these birds have grown up around people, right? They've all grown up with having a landlord, right? A person who has put up a colony for them and has potentially handled them regularly. So I don't know if it's kind of just a carryover of that, if they associate some level of safety with people, being around people, or what. But yeah, that would be my guess. These are hard questions, Nicole. Ask me an easy one.
I mean, these are in the chat. We have really smart viewers today.
Excellent.
Do we know, so speaking of, they're not roosting in their houses, they're nesting there. Do we know why they choose to leave those their houses and gather in these roosts? Is there something about their desire to be social? Do we have any idea why they start to gather before they head out on migration? It's clear, you know, as they're going down I-35, it makes sense that they would stop and gather for safety, but like, what motivates them to make that change?
Well, as someone who's been stuck in her house for like months now, getting out and going somewhere to socialize, you know, has some appeal. So I don't really know. It's just kind of how they develop. They are very social birds. The roost colony is going to have multiple nesting pair in it, right? It's not going to be just one purple martin pair. So they're social creatures, and I don't know exactly how that developed. It just did.
We got to get into their minds, and then we'll have the answers to all these questions.
Well, and two, as you know, as these birds are headed south, they have at that point left their nest colony. So
Right.
what do you do as you're headed south? Well, there's safety in numbers. So you're going to, you know, this species has decided to handle that by gathering together with other purple martins.
Okay. Just a couple of questions. We're wrapping up, and if anybody needs to jump off, feel free. We're recording this, so we'll post this. About the modus receptor or the modus receivers, who erects those, and do you know how much they cost to erect?
I don't know. There's a website you can Google, Modus Network, I think is what it's called. I don't know the actual cost, but people, you know, whoever just decides that they want to put it up. It may be a researcher in a certain area, or it may be volunteers, you know, and then they'll go off and obviously buy the components needed for the receiver and install it wherever.
Okay. We know that most of their activity when they're in Brazil is in the forest. Do we know why? Since they've so focused on urban areas, parking lots there, and then they've moved to a total rural experience there. Are there reasons for that?
I don't know. It's like this huge big unknown right down there. I mean, a lot of the country is forested, but I think for me, it's just like, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why would a bird that wants open area for nesting and for roosting on its migration, why would they all of a sudden be in this forested habitat? It didn't make any sense to me. But then when we got the more detailed GPS data where we could really see where they were hanging out, it's like, yeah, they're in the forest, but they're kind of in these potential open areas in the forest. So,
Interesting.
I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of that land is forested. So that's their main option down there.
Yeah. Is there a roost in the San Antonio area?
I think this is an updated roost map, and I think there's a yellow dot down there, but to my knowledge, there is not one. So somebody needs to go check that out.
Okay. And I think you might have mentioned this, but I don't want to misspeak. When do they return to the US after in the spring?
So I didn't cover that part, and that's, you know, I could give another presentation on that. They're one of our earliest migrants. We have birds showing up in the United States in early January. So for Austin area, they show up anywhere from maybe January the 15th through February the 15th. So they're coming back really early.
Great. Those are the questions that we got. Great questions.
Okay.
And a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you for the
lots of comments in the chat about how much everyone learned. So we really appreciate you and your time. And I hope people will join us tonight if you want to see the roost on video, or head up there. The purple martins are there every night of the week for another month, maybe 6 weeks. So go check them out. Be safe and do that. But thank you all so much for joining us, and everyone be well and take care.
Bye.
Bye.